welcome to K21 Talk Show. This is Aditya. Today's guest is not a cricketer or an ex-cricketer or a coach for that matter, but he's been associated with sport for a very, very long time. He started off as a reporter in cricket, then hosted shows in football, rugby, Commonwealth Games and a lot more. He's right now a lead commentator in cricket and an expert commentator in kabaddi. Almost 18 years in the world of broadcast. Let's welcome Radhakrishnan Srinivasan, better known as RK.
Hi RK, how are you?
Hey, you're good, man. Very, very good. Very good. How are you?
All good, all good. Good to see you. Long time.
I know it's been a while. Everybody is locked in. So good, actually.
So RK, so I think I was just mentioning, so 18 years in broadcast, am I right?
Yeah, 18 years, 2000.
It's been a very, very long time. So if I'm not wrong, you started off with ESPN Star, the old ESPN Star back then, and then moved on to Neo 10, and now back to Star. So it's been a lovely 18 years. So let's start the journey of sort of recollecting it, and then probably end with giving a lot of tips on how to become what you are now.
Sure.
Sure. So the thing is, I think RK, I found an anomaly. Okay, so you are from Tamil Nadu. Okay. But you didn't choose to study engineering. You studied physics. That itself is an anomaly.
So I'll be honest. I'm from Chennai, proper Chennai school, college, as you said. Yeah, I did my physics. It's also because of a very simple reason that those days, at least, I'm sure it still exists. Not too sure. You had to pay a fairly high degree of. You used to have something called the management seats.
Yeah, they came up with a lot of words for it.
Yeah, so I did not get a very, very high percentage of marks in my standard 12, and I did try the IITs and stuff. I obviously did not get through IIT, but so I mean, to be honest, I left with not much of a choice but to join a graduation course. And since I was a student, I joined I joined the physics stream. So it was not like I loved physics and I wanted to become or something like that. I'll be very honest. The grades were not up to scratch. I'll be extremely honest. So I thought, I mean, instead of paying a heavy amount and being a part of engineering college, I thought it's better not to spend that kind of money because it was heavy. We couldn't afford it. Very, very simple. So belonged to a class. We couldn't afford that kind of money at all. So I said, whatever is possible, I'll join, and that's why I joined physics.
Yeah. So from physics to MBA, and then from physics to MBA, and then broadcast. How did that jump happen?
I think growing up in the 80s and 90s, I think it was more about. Your post-graduation was effectively about two things, right? So one was computers were huge at that point in time. So you had two people. I mean, besides the engineers and the doctors, you had for post-graduation, essentially, people looked at MCA and MBA as two options. Not particularly great with computers, never had that interest. But MBA, I thought, is a possible option for me because I was decent at communications and I used to be fairly regular at debates and whatnot and stuff. And I said, look, if I've got to secure my future, which is down in an Indian context, I've got to do a post-graduation and maybe MBA is the way to go. So that's how actually I thought I should pursue my MBA in marketing. So if you ask me whether it was a dream to pursue an MBA, well, obviously that's not what I said at my interviews. I'll be honest. So it's like, it's one of those things. I had to, find a foothold somewhere in life. So I did my MBA.
Yeah. So I'm the broadcast part. So if I'm not wrong, initially when you joined, you didn't join to be in front of the camera. You joined as an AP. You joined as a producer.
Yeah. So I mean, effectively, so I broadcast is something that I aspired over a period of time because I was interested in communication. As I said, I was interested in sport. So around 2001, 2002. So I thought I have to do something worthwhile in life because I joined my job after I finished my MBA. I got placed on day one from the campus, but I wasn't exactly enjoying it. So I thought maybe it's not a bad time to self-assess and then get an area that I really enjoy or would possibly enjoy working. And as far as joining or rather being behind the camera, for me it was very, very simple. It was very simple in the industry. That's all it was. So even if it meant absolutely anything, I would have done. I would have done just about any job that a media company would have offered me. So that's why, because I didn't have too many choices. Really lucky that I did get a breakthrough at ESPN Star. But interestingly, what happened was I did get a break at CNBC TV 18. That was based in Bombay. I moved out of Chennai in '98, so I've been living outside Chennai ever since. So I was based predominantly in Bombay at that point in time. So CNBC TV 18 gave me a break before ESPN. So I joined for about 1 month, after which I got a call from ESPN, and then I moved to Delhi. I would have just, if they had told me you please work for free, I would have done that also. Such was my interest.
Yeah. So the one of your first shows, especially for people like me who were born in the 80s and the late 80s. So almost all our evenings would have been, like almost all our evenings we would have kept ourselves free between 8 and 8:30 or 7:30 to watch what was probably the most popular news show back then. This is Sports Center. So that was one of the first shows that you worked in, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, Sports Center was huge. To get that kind of exposure that early in my career was, I still thank that exposure. Only because of the fact that I got to work with a variety of people from different backgrounds. You had people from Sky Sports or BBC or all the CNNs of the world. So all had congregated at that point in time, to be a part of ESPN Star, and of course with respect to Sports Center. So that was a massive learning experience for somebody like me, and I take extreme pride in looking back at those days and saying I was part of probably one of the best shows, sports shows on planet Earth, Sports Center, period.
Yeah, so as I told you, so that concept itself, the Sports Center, like every day half an hour of sports news all around the world, that concept was new back then, and it's not like, I still ask a lot of people the same question. Why was that show shut down? Like that is a wonderful concept. That is a wonderful concept. So don't you think some concept like that should be brought back? I've tried voicing it to a lot of people, but yeah, they don't seem to listen to it.
No, I think the conditions that we operated in then were completely different. For example, I'll give you a classic example. So we operated out of a very small place. When I say we, as in ESPN Star, those days operated out of a very small place in Delhi. Right? Those were the days where you did not have regular uplinking facilities, or it was not provided at that point in time. So what happened was you had 3 sets of uplink during a week. So Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Whereas Sports Center, as you're aware, is an everyday news show. Now, when you have international sports centers, so to speak, the India Sports Center, or the American version of Sports Center, they were. In the sense that it was like you get news and you kind of wear the news a part of that Sports Center edition the same evening. Whereas what was for a Sports Center India show, you had to be coming in fairly regularly. But since we had only 6 days of uplink, you could do it on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So, say for example, if you had of a sort of Ganguly, right? Or if something towards that extent happened fairly regularly, the ability or should I say, we didn't have too much at that time to immediately send across those things. So what happened was, effectively you had more feature happening out of India that gradually changed over a period of time. But otherwise, in terms of the quality and the time and the edits, the kind of love for footage that ESPN Star had, or probably Sports Center had, that was just phenomenal. Even today, a Sports Center show is something that you can sit back and watch if you're a proper sports fan, because the kind of importance that was given to editorial was immense.
Yeah, so that's the thing. So it's like going back to those days, the ESPN Star. So if you tune into that channel, you would get to see starting from your cricket to football, billiards. I fondly remember I always remember X Games, the X Games of the world. You had the bodybuilding thing, you had the world's strongest man. Like almost every sport was there. So that was a different era back then, and it probably made it easier for you guys also because you could use footages from a wide range of stuff. So okay, after that, if I'm not wrong, did you do radio? I heard somewhere that you did radio commentary as well.
Radio commentary, as in I was probably one of the earliest to get a radio station named Play, which was a part of World Space Satellite Radio. So it happened. So I was with ESPN Star, based out of Singapore, and what happened at that point in time was there was this offer. So I was a consultant with ESPN Star, and there was this offer to set up a radio station, which was exclusively a 24-hour sports radio station. So I thought that was extremely an interesting concept, and I went about setting it from scratch. So I had a few people that I knew really well in that space, and so it was a great experience for me to set it up. Not only set it up. So I was in charge of hiring, I was in charge of putting a rundown, I was also doing a bit of, radio jockeying and whatnot and stuff. So it's...
sorry to, I think people are complaining that you're a little low, so...
The audio?
Yeah.
Okay, this is okay, let me hold it. Is this better?
Yeah, this is better, slightly better. Yeah.
Slightly better, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was saying that, so I had the opportunity to kind of... set up an entire radio station, so decide on what to speak and what not to speak, and it gave a great flavor. It was not just about sport in India, it was giving, I had the opportunity to do a variety of international sport as well, so tied up with the BBC to get the latest news from BBC in the UK, got Stringers, the networking got going, and therefore you could get the latest from the EPL, discussions around EPL. So it was more it was more about having a good experience overall. So I think for me it was just awesome and great experience.
Yeah. So this private radio channel. So like if you remember, only after the turn of the millennium, the private radio channels in India started coming up. So we're almost like 18, 19 years since the private radio channel boom started. But even now, you can't really pinpoint to one thing and then say, hey, this is your sports radio channel. There is sports flashes who do commentary for some of the India games and all that, but there's just only one. Why do you think this radio commentary has not picked up? Because you having done it, and I've also listened to a lot of football commentary via BBC app, via the ABC app, the Australian football or the cricket. I mean, the radio commentary has got its own charm. It's a vastly different world on its own. I mean, why do you think it's not picked up in India?
Well, I think a couple of reasons. One is, I think when you talk particularly about the 24-hour radio station at Play, so we never did commentary per se, right? So it was, I think, commentary. Then you'll have to go to the rights issues and whatnot that are associated with that, right? But I think one of the reasons I think at that point in time when it didn't go beyond what was expected is also because of the revenue model that they had. World Space Satellite Radio never believed in advertisements. So you didn't have the advertising revenue at all compared to the FM stations that you have, which play music and whatnot and stuff. There is plenty of advertising. So you're purely, it was a subscription-based model at that point in time. And I think the inclination, it was far ahead of time, at least as far as India was concerned, because you're talking about the early 2000s. So subscription-based stuff is picking up fairly big in India now. So I'm talking about a good 15 years back where people were skeptical about going for it. You had subscribers, but not to the amount of
England or Australia or anywhere.
You can sustain. Yeah. And I think when it comes to radio commentary, but the way I look at it is, say, you mentioned about TMS.
Yeah.
I was on about the TMS and the ABC. I think it gives you a very, very different flavor. So if we can look at programming in that sense, there is always scope, because I think there is scope for storytelling a lot more as far as radio is concerned. So and also about a completely different brand of programming is very, very important. we need to introduce characters a lot more, because I think when you mention the TMS and the broadcast that happened in Australia, you straight away associate one or two characters who liven it up a lot more. So because the access to information is so much now, I think you're going to look at giving it that much bit more to the listeners. So I think the storytelling aspect needs to be concentrated a bit more so that we can get back to the glory days of radio.
Yeah. So this one more thing that I want to add is, say for example, you're commentating on a match, and then there are people watching it. So when you're watching it on TV, the viewer's dependency on a commentator is actually less. But when you're actually listening to radio commentaries, the dependency on the commentator is very high. And the other beauty of it is in when you're watching a broadcast, you're watching it. So the anticipation, because you're seeing it, the anticipation level is low. But when you're hearing it on radio, the anticipation level is extremely high. I mean, that's the beauty of that's the charm of radio commentary, right?
And also just to add on to your point, I mean, a case in point for me is the podcast. I mean, look at the number of people that are gradually turning towards podcasts. It's an industry that is growing. Obviously, I'm not talking about the revenue models and whatnot, but people are inclined to listening to good podcasts, which means people are not averse to just audio, right? I mean, people would want to hear great quality audio and great quality commentary. I think that is what is very, very important in terms of creating or narrating lovely stories and make it interesting, because a podcast is what? I mean, you're basically listening to conversations or concepts or whatever the case may be in your subject area of interest. So if there is obviously scope towards that, so I'm sure your radio broadcast can be made a lot more interesting with a variety of segments that go into making it a lot more interesting.
So, Akhil, you've been an anchor. Sorry, first of all, you started off as an on-field reporter. Then you've been a presenter. You've hosted football, rugby, Commonwealth Games, etc. Now a lead commentator. So, I mean, how did you? The thing is, the level of discipline required for all these roles is very, very different. There are certain things which you can, if you're a lead commentator, you have to speak at a given point of time. Expert commentator have similar rules, and then if you're hosting it, different rules. How did you work on this versatility, and then how much did you have to change? Like even now, you're a lead commentator in Tamil, whereas when you jump to Kabaddi, you're an expert commentator, right? So how did you develop this discipline in you, and then how did you develop this sort of versatility, or if I may call it that?
Yeah, I think, I mean, when you're talking about versatility, I think it's important to be interested in sport in general and not necessarily around cricket, not just one sport. I think I've always believed that there is so much to learn and apply from a variety of sport to the sport that you are operating in. A classic example, say for example, if I'm doing something around, Kabaddi, for example, right? So the fitness levels, the demands are so high that you can always kind of correlate that with any other, contact sport or any other physically demanding sport. Right? Say, for example, if I'm working on cricket, and if you are talking about Virat Kohli's fitness, for example, you're talking about stamina, you're talking about strength. You can always go and pick up points from, say, football, for example, where you're talking about fullbacks, the kind of energy and the stamina that is required, and the kind of body mass that one needs to keep going, and the percentage that of improvement that is required to become a top-notch athlete. So what I do is try to follow a variety of sport and also understand how things operate under different ecosystems. Because you talk about football, you talk about any other sport, say in Europe or in the US, the kind of analytics, for example, has gone a million miles ahead. The kind of the physical training or the mental aspect of the game has surged ahead. So there's so much to pick and apply to the ecosystem that you're anyway working in. So I think that is important. And coming to your question about sometimes you're the lead, sometimes you're the expert. I think as a lead commentator, you're only driving the conversation. That's your primary idea, to narrate the story and then allow the experts to take over for their expertise. I think when it comes to an expert opinion, it is important for you to be not very generic in your comments, but try to
Yes.
add value to what the viewer is already seeing.
Correct.
So if there is a question asked, you just don't give run-of-the-mill answers, but try to add, and therefore the preparation in both cases is a lot more, whether you're a host or you're an expert, because I mean everybody can see what is happening in kabaddi, and they kind of understand the basic rules. I think that is where you try to add a bit more to understand what goes through in the sport.
So the one more question that I had to ask was, say you've commentated in cricket and then you're commentating in kabaddi. So I'm sure sometime last year you would have had to alternate between two sports on adjacent days, or maybe in the same day, same day also. So in cricket, because cricket is a stop-start game, whereas your kabaddi isn't. So does that affect your, like for example, does that affect your calling in any way? Say for example in cricket, you say something, so you put the question to the expert, and then like when the expert is giving his opinion, you sort of have time to prepare for your next point, or like you look at the game, anticipate what you're going to ask next. But whereas in kabaddi, you don't have that time. Like you have to be continuously.
I think the fundamental difference to me was in kabaddi, I was an expert and I was doing commentary in English, and in cricket and in kabaddi I never did Tamil commentary. Right? In cricket, I'm increasingly doing Tamil commentary, and I'm a part of the studio as a host. So I think these are slightly two different things. So when you're talking about the pace, I am tuned to speaking in English the way a kabaddi demands. Right? So that is something that I'm used to doing. So within that ecosystem, you get used to a few things. I think the bigger challenge is to move from one language to another. I think that is where, because what you do constantly is you're shifting your train of thoughts from one language to another, which can be a lot more challenging. And that is why I think, when you look at commentators, the comfort level of one over the other is fairly visible, because if you're doing two languages, it's not easy to jump from one commentary box to go to another commentary box and completely immediately or get used to the train of thoughts and therefore delivery. I think that is a bigger challenge than the sport itself.
Just to add to it, like I've seen a lot of because I've done a lot of Hindi broadcasts a lot. I've seen how people like Sunny Gavaskar or Sanjay Manjrekar, like when they jump from English to Hindi, like the first 1 hour, like they sort of take time. Sometimes they tell the score in English and all that. But for you, it's doubly difficult because you're one language. So cricket in Tamil to kabaddi in English. So yeah, I've always been impressed with the way that you sort of adapted between sports, and then and you've never lost the pace. You've never lost the flow or pace. So yeah. So okay, one other question about kabaddi. So the thing is, how much you've been doing world feed commentary. Sorry, in kabaddi the world feed is Hindi, so I'm in English commentary. So you've been doing English commentary in kabaddi for a while. The thing is, moment anybody mentions PKL, I think PKL is one of probably India's biggest success stories. The way the sport has grown is actually very, very pleasing to watch. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Like, because PKL has certainly given the sport a massive, massive boom.
Look, yeah. So I think when it comes to PKL, it's a good unified effort that has gone into making the product that it is. Right? It is from all quarters, whether it is from the franchisees' part of view or whether it is from the broadcaster's point of view. There is a very clear direction that is associated with PKL. Look, kabaddi was always big as far as certain parts of India was concerned. But to take it to the masses needed a good coordinated effort. And that is, I think, what the broadcasters and the franchisees managed to do. Right? So it had to appeal to different sections of the population, which is why the storytelling was extremely important. I think it was carefully crafted from season 1 in terms of what they wanted to achieve season after season after season. So, I mean, whether it was in terms of projecting the athletes in the way that they need to be projected, or I mean, smaller details like the way they present themselves, like the way the promos are shot. It has to be appealing. Look, I mean, why is say an American sport or any American sport so popular amongst Americans to begin with? It is because it is marketed in a supremely wonderful way.
And packaged as well. Yes.
And packaged beautifully. You look at the packaging that Kabaddi has, it's fantastic. You look at the pace of the sport, it is seriously good. So what they have done is to take the positives that are inherently associated with the sport itself and package it very, very well. And also in terms of tweaking the rules, moving on from a few of those archaic rules, they made it easier for people to understand. Look, at the end of the day, people who are tuning in should be able to easily understand the sport and also be able to relate to that. And you had the city-based, teams, and therefore you had that going amongst the people of that particular city. It moved from one venue to another to give that kind of a flavor as well. The promotions were spot on. The storytelling was very, very good because you picked and chose characters that can be appealing. Moving forward, you had the monikers that were attached to players as well, and slowly by say season 2 or season 3, you made superstars, and you made those superstars as household names. I think that is very, very important, I think that's a huge deal of credit goes to the entire department that was driving this at Star.
Yeah, so that's the thing. So my first introduction to Kabaddi was when we did a small thing called Corporate Kabaddi Fest, which happened in Chennai. Meaning that was the first time I actually watched Kabaddi from up close. Meaning, like you said a while before, the value of the sport is when somebody tunes in and then is able to understand the sport in a very, very short amount of time. So I think what PKL and Co have achieved that simplicity where like anybody tuning in can watch it.
And also in the first 1 or 2 seasons, I distinctly remember, it was all about, I mean, I wasn't a part of the first season or so, but I mean, I distinctly remember every time you tuned in, you don't expect the same guys to tune in. You will have a variety of people tuning in. So the concentration was on re-emphasizing the rules, re-emphasizing the teams, talking about the individual stars, so that the recall is that much more higher. So once you move on from that, then you can talk about the other things. So I think that was very, very carefully planned, and that was a good strategy going forward, which is why PKL became or is the product that it is today.
Yeah, lovely to hear. I mean, PKL has been an absolute success. I mean, I think you've been part of it. We've also done some work towards it. I think watching the success of PKL has been very, very pleasing. So, okay, so you've done multiple roles. You've done multiple sports as well, and multiple shows. I mean, is there any, if you have to pinpoint to any one show which was very, very difficult, or one set of shows which was very, very enjoyable to work in, are there any favorites, or are there any tough ones like that?
I mean, so when I entered the industry, Sports Center was like huge. To just be a part of Sports Center was in itself was a huge honor. And I think during those days, if you got a chance to produce, or if you got a chance to voice over a particular piece, that itself was a huge achievement, because you don't walk in and straight away produce a show. You don't walk in and straight away do a voiceover. You had to go and earn those things. So I think that was massive. And in terms of writing a script that appeals to people, that was a huge challenge at the start of it all. Because to just put in the right words, just to convey what you exactly wanted to convey in a story, that was a massive challenge. And then, moving on to say Neo Sports, they gave me a huge opportunity in front of the camera. So that was almost a dream come true.
I think, sorry to interrupt you, but lot of people, not many people of the current generation will remember Dial C for cricket, but I very well remember that.
Yeah, I mean, so I think so that was again an opinion-driven show. It's been an opinion-driven show, which kindled interest amongst the masses. So that was a different kind of a challenge, because you had to respond at the same time. You had to be balanced at the same time. You need to make sure that if somebody is going overboard, you had to control. So that gave you a different sense of challenge. Producing shows gave me a different kind of an adrenaline rush, because you are on top of a lot of things. While I was with 10 Sports, I was in charge of a particular vertical, which means man management skills, get the PowerPoint sorted, get the budgets approved. Now, that was a completely different challenge in itself. And then put together good Champions League shows, staying up late in the night with your team, making sure that, and to appeal to proper football audience is a different ball game altogether, because you've got to be absolutely on top of things, because they can come really hard at you for every small mistake that you can possibly commit. So those are challenges. And now then, of course, you've got a completely different language that I'm operating in. Tamil, of course, it's my mother tongue, but I mean, anybody would understand that one is to speak with your friends in your mother tongue. That's a completely different ball game to be.
And speaking for broadcast.
Broadcast language, you've got to be very, very careful about what you use and how you speak, because every word of yours is being monitored, and one small slip up, you will get to know on Twitter. So,
you will get absolutely trolled.
It's things that you need to be extremely careful. So I think every role that I've kind of fulfilled has had its own set of challenges and fulfillments.
Glad to hear that. So, Arket, I've seen your TED talk, which is, and I have to say that I really enjoyed it. Meaning, for all the people watching out here, so there are a lot of people who don't really know what happens in the world of broadcast. And more importantly, there are a lot of people who grow up watching Harsha, you, Jatin, Mayanti, or like just to name Gautam, just to name a few. Meaning, if the people of this age, if the 90s kids want to start something or want to enter the world of broadcast, meaning what advice do you have for them? And then, obviously, before trying to enter something, you need to have a certain set of skills. I'm sure, like before you went in front of the camera, you would have worked on your skills. I mean, what advice would you give to the people who are trying to become what you are now?
I think, look, every one of us is a fan of sport, right? I mean, anybody who wants to enter this field is definitely a fan of sport. But I think what you need to consciously do is to, even as you remain a fan, but you don't overdo a lot of things. Because, and say, you can be elated, you can be disappointed, but you cannot be seen as somebody doing that very, very obviously. I know there are editorial challenges that will exist always, but it's important personally also to kind of step back from a situation and look at a particular situation that transpired fairly objectively. That's very, very important, because you need to differentiate yourself from an ordinary fan, and you have to dive deeper into things that are seemingly obvious, right? So I think that is important. See, because I know we talk about numbers, a lot more these days, but numbers and analytics should help you convey the stories better and in an objective way. So that is very, very important. So if you're too attached to a particular subject, I think then you run the risk of getting too emotional about your presentation or about the way you are. So I think that distinction is very, very important. Besides that, of course, the basic skill sets are extremely important in terms of the way you communicate, in terms of the words that you carefully use. That is very important. Say, for example, I always say this, even if, say, a batsman gets out to a very, very poor ball, right? And if he has played a shot that he shouldn't have played, you don't say that is a horrendous shot, that is a ridiculous shot and stuff. Maybe there are people who say that, and I completely buy that opinion. Maybe that can come from people who have played at the topmost level, because who know what it is.
It also depends from who. It also depends who is saying it or where it's coming from.
You can always word that slightly different and say, maybe he would have played it differently had he played it all over again. Is one way of looking at it, or maybe he could have played it better. Is another way of looking at it. So, as a viewer, when I'm say listening to say Aditya commentate on the game, I'm also trying to go with the persona that Aditya is, right? So if say Mr. Gavaskar talking about a front foot or a back foot is completely different to probably somebody like me talking about front foot and back.
Exactly.
And that is where I think it is important to kind of convey the messages in a way that need to be conveyed and that is in sync with the personality that you are. What do people expect out of me? People expect me to narrate stories. People expect me to get the best stories out of people, and that is my role essentially as a host. As a commentator, they want me to go beyond the obvious without being too intrusive or too somebody who gives too much of a gyan, so to speak. So I think that is very, very important for me.
Yeah, that's the balance that you need to achieve. Like not stating the obvious and at the same time trying to complicate it further. I think just add to one of the points that you said, when you said like you can't be too emotional as an anchor or when you're hosting it, or you can't be too attached to something. So one of the conversations that we had with Russell Arnold last week. So I was actually telling him how if you're a expert commentator, and he was also the opinion that if I'm an expert commentator and if I'm not attached to my team, it is very hard to bring out the passion that I have in me.
True.
So you say,
True.
So that's the point I'm coming to as well. Say for example, that's what people need to understand. So as an expert commentator, you're sort of allowed to have that 10, 15% or 20% bias to your own team, so that like the emotions come out very, very naturally. But as a lead commentator, you can't be that.
So when I'm saying this, so I look at it this way. Look, everybody knows who is from which part of the world, right? I mean, so there is no secret. And therefore, when you sit down and chat in a pre-match show, there is a bit of a banter that is always welcome and accepted. So that's absolutely fine. But I'm saying, so when one is commentating, for example, I'll give you say I'm a huge fan of Sachin Tendulkar, right? Now Sachin Tendulkar gets out, and therefore at that point in time, I still need to make sure that the cricketer or the expert sitting right next to me brings out the reason why he got out the way he did. At that point, I can't keep going I can't say, oh, he shouldn't have done this, shouldn't have done that, because that's the fan in me that comes in. See, I'm not saying completely hide the fan in you. I'm only saying that you need to be fairly detached and less emotional about everything. I know sport is all about emotions, and those high moments, you need to bring out those emotions, but you can't be completely emotional all the while and keep talking in the same way, because then you become completely different from the job that you are supposed to do.
I think the point that you said is 100% valid. As in, like, if you want to be part of broadcast, you have to learn to keep your attachments and your emotions aside. You have to know how to.
Or you give your reasons. You give your reasons backed by valid arguments. I mean, recently, for example, I'm a huge football fan. I'm a Manchester United fan. So I was watching this game between Spurs and Man United, right? I mean, and United did not have particularly a great first half. David De Gea, let in a goal. I mean, it was a tough one, obviously. Then Harry Maguire wasn't the quickest. And I was listening to, say, Roy Keane, the former United captain. I'm a huge fan of Roy Keane. So he obviously had, harsh things to say about the goalkeeper and the defender, right? At the same time, I understand that point of view, but you need to be backing that up with very solid arguments. Now, he's great TV. There is no two ways about it. But when you look at, say, somebody like Gary Neville or Jamie Carragher, who analyze football, they are big on opinions, but they back those opinions with proper facts. I mean, you know that Gary Neville is a United player. You know from the way he speaks that his heart beats for United. Same is the case with Jamie Carragher. But there are times when Gary Neville does come down hard on United. So that doesn't mean that he's not any more attached or he's whatever. So he's still doing a job and he's giving you reasons on the basis of what he sees and what he thinks. So that is very, very important, that distinction. So it doesn't mean that he doesn't like United or he likes United that much bit more. He's fulfilling his duty of an expert. I think that distinction, despite him being a fan, is very, very important.
Absolutely valid point, Zakir. Thanks. I think it's they're very, very valuable points. Can we take a couple of fan questions? There have been a lot of ones coming our way. One of them is, what are the challenges that you faced when you decided to move to an on-screen role from a behind-the-scenes role?
Challenges, I think one of the first things is the kind of scrutiny that you have as somebody who's on air is immense. You're always trying to search for perfection. You want to make sure that everything is spot on. But I think over a period of time, one kind of understands that criticism is very. There is nobody who has escaped criticism. There is nobody who will escape criticism. So I think you try to be the way you look at it is you try to do your best, and then leave it for people to judge. So at the end of the day, I think you go to bed thinking that you have done to the best of your ability. Because initial days, you get a lot. You get really emotional about everything that can happen. The slightest bit of criticism can affect you or has affected. I don't think there is anybody who could say that on day one, if he's being criticized, he won't be affected. I don't think that. But over a point in time, you understood the difference between a troll and a constructive criticism. I think that takes some time, and so that is one big challenge in terms of audience reaction. And in terms of the challenge per se that the role offers, I think it's a role where you've got to be mentally really sharp always, because there are so
No
many
doubt.
things that can happen around you, and it's all happening at breakneck speed, and it's all live environment. So the chances of slip-ups will be high, but you've got to be extremely on guard about, and you're also listening to a lot of things that are happening around you. You're hearing the guest, you're hearing the producer, you're hearing the director, there's a video that you're looking at. So you've got to be on top of all those things, and therefore I've always felt that getting into a good routine ahead of a live show or ahead of live broadcast is very important.
Lovely. There's one more question. I think people have. I think your kabaddi conversation was quite good. I think one of them is asking. No, one of them has stated one of your lines, which is you use electricity, he pays the bill for Fazil's tackles. Was that one of your lines?
Sorry?
You use the electricity and he pays the bill. Was that one of your commentary lines in kabaddi?
Maybe
On
I'm
Fazil.
not sure.
Yeah, someone has just pinpointed that line. The other question, it's been 4 years since the last Kabaddi World Cup. Do you think you need to conduct one post the lockdown?
Look, I mean, it's Kabaddi presents a very different challenge, right? I mean, in an era then when we are talking about social distancing, Kabaddi is all about contact sports. So will be interesting to see when it does really come back and when it can hopefully happen. Would love to see Kabaddi, but will take time, does take time under these circumstances.
So talking about contact sports, just to adding to it, so contact sports are back in several parts of the world. Most importantly, in AFL, back in Australia, in AFL, they've started. Their 2 big leagues have started, and some states have actually gotten fans as well into the stadium. So hopefully there'll be something in India also. Somebody is very fond of your dial C for cricket, Ballebaz, great Indian victories, and a few more on Neo Sports. That man has good memory. What would be your best advice to those 20-25-year-old passionate sports enthusiasts who are looking to switch careers / in a dilemma to enter a career they are passionate about? I think the question is more about how do you become an anchor?
So I think it's important to give it a good shot. At the same time, it's also important to understand that the road ahead is not easy. Because sometimes what does happen is there are a lot of people that walk into this industry having very high hopes. Well, it's important to have your high hopes and high expectations, but it's also important to stay put and fight it out. Now, the slight issue that when I only hear people talking about I want to be an anchor, is I know that is the so-called glamour role as far as TV industry is concerned. But to make an anchor or to make a show look good, there are plenty of people who are working in the background in far more challenging roles. For example, the role of a producer, a role of a director. You work in analytics yourself. Kadamba Sports does a fabulous job in analytics. So in terms of providing the right numbers that make the show look a lot better, I think those are all things that people need to consider as well. Because what happens sometimes is once you enter the industry, you suddenly realize it's an ocean. And therefore you should have that open mind to go for things that will actually interest you. For all you know, you might be an excellent producer, but you thought you will be an anchor or you want to be an anchor, and therefore you should have that flexibility to look at that side. And for anybody who is aspiring to be one, you should get a foothold first in the industry. I think that's extremely important. It's that is critical. I mean, walking or getting to the industry, do whatever you think is offered to you to begin with. Stay put. If you're willing to fight it out, it's a tough world out there. And if you're willing to fight it out, put in the hard yards, yeah, sure, why not?
It's more important to identify where you fit in, and then like you said, the advice is probably be open to broadcast, not just say I'll do only X or Y in broadcast.
Exactly.
Well, that's pretty much it, RK. Thanks a lot, RK. Thanks for your time. I think whoever has watched it would have learned a thing or two about broadcast and then the journey to broadcast, and if they are interested, how to do it. So, thank you. Wherever you are, stay safe, and then hopefully live sports resumes soon.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much. Thanks so much for having me. Bye.
Yeah. Bye.